starts with something,
Yeah.
but and it does. So yes, it's Thursday, October the 22nd. It is 3 p.m. Oh, the sun's coming out. It's been cloudy for a long time. So who knows what the temperature is? Probably hot and humid. So thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate you spending your time with us. And if you're wondering why we are sitting opposite than we have done for the last 15 weeks, this is week 16.
Wow.
Yeah, very wow. But that's because I'm left-handed, he's right-handed, and on Sunday I was told to stop fiddling with my beard because apparently when Father Lewis, well, actually I know it's true. So when Father Lewis starts talking, I'm going, and I'll suddenly think I shouldn't be doing that, and then I'll suddenly forget and I'll be doing it again. And this person said, it's really annoying to watch you fiddle with your beard. So if Father Lewis sees me doing this, because I'm left-handed, I will fiddle and he will slap me. And just in case I don't remember, I have an old mask here, which is written, "Don't touch." And I know what it means. So there you go. So good afternoon, Vern. Good afternoon, Holly. Yes, we have.
Karen and
It's
Paula.
your foot. Oh, no. Yeah, good explanation. My foot is doing a lot better, thank you. Meaning if he grapples me too hard, he might end up with my right foot in his ear or something. Good afternoon, Paula. Good afternoon, Karen. And good afternoon, Kit. It's good to see you all. So, before we begin, as always, service times for this upcoming Sunday, 8 o'clock for Rite 1, 10 o'clock for Rite 2, and the drive-through at 11 till 11:30. Please remember the requirements: social distancing, masks, and the masks on correctly all the time. You anything to add with that?
No,
No?
I think you did a very good job.
Thank you. As always, as I mentioned on Tuesday, if you'd like to come to either of those services, just give me a call and I'll let you know if there's enough room. As of this moment, 3:02 on Thursday the 22nd, there is in either service. But yeah, just let me know. Okay,
Excuse me.
that went quickly, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Last week we began looking at what we call practical examples of what this flourishing wisdom life would look like. And the first example used was what would be seen to be a normal religious or thing of piety, fasting. In this example, Jesus spoke of a reward, giving a choice of two outcomes: a reward from the people or a reward from God. The reward from the people was gained by having a flashy "look at me" attitude toward what you were doing. The reward from God was gained by doing what you were doing in secret. Jesus clarifies what this means by stating that how we behave is a function of our heart. If our heart desires people's approval for our spiritual discipline, we will let them know. But if we desire God's approval, we will keep what we are doing in secret, so only He will know. All of this doesn't just harken back to the attitude of the humility mentioned in the Beatitudes, but reminds us of the discipline focus, of the discipleship focus on the Master, where we are not only to copy Him, but we are also to do His will. We ended with verses 19 through 21 of chapter 6 regarding where one should store up treasures and regarding the truth that your real and actual treasure is where your heart actually is. We told you that these verses provide the conclusion of this long section about greater righteousness, mentioning the wordplay going on here, and these last three verses provide a perfect summary of the whole argument that is found in the previous verses of chapter 6. We'll look how the notion of reward, the one received from people already received, and the one from God stored up as a later gift turns into treasure at this point, referring to the gift, grace God has in store for us both now and in the future. We also looked at how the heart matters, not just matters of the heart, but how the heart is involved in every part of our being and intellect, not just our emotional center. This reinforces Jesus' message about how following him involves our whole selves. We noted that we could do right things for the wrong reasons, and that our motivations are, once again, driven by our heart. And this is the reason Jesus is calling all those practitioners of piety hypocrites. It's not because they really don't give alms or really don't pray or fast, but because they do so without a whole heart. Put simply, their hearts were not in harmony with their actions.
So let's look at this week's texts. Do not stir up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust consume. Sorry, I'm going to start it again. Do not stir up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. But stir up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Those are verses 19 through 21. And I can hear you screaming through the camera, hey, we've already done those verses. We've already looked at them. And you said that they were concluding verses. And they were concluding verses for what preceded them, which all of which is true. But, well, how can I put it? We're reading them again. And that's because as much as those verses refer back to what went on in 1 through 21, they also look forward, reminding us of the unity of the Sermon on the Mount. In short, these verses underpin the theme of human flourishing based on the wisdom metaphor of the two ways of being in the world, one way being foolish and the other one being wise. One's relationship to treasure and money prefigures where our values and being lie, as will be examined in the next few verses. As always, though, there's logic to the wisdom.
And now here's this week's text. The eye is the lamp of the body. So, if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Now, this is a well-known text, and we've heard it for years and years and years and years. But it's very complicated, and it's very difficult to translate.
I'm just reading what Kit said. Good Mark, and good Mark. Good day, Mark, and good afternoon, Anne.
Off the topic,
Kit.
Imagining you restraining yourself from rubbing your beard. Father A made me think of Dr. Strangelove. I think you touching your beard might be less distracting than this image.
Yeah, and I almost did pretty well. Then I scratched it, and then I folded my arms, and my hand was crawling up my...
It was going up to the beard. Okay, this is a well-known text. It's complicated, and it's difficult to translate. And one of the reasons the translation is difficult is because it's full of cultural references that Matthew's audience would understand, but we don't. They kind of go right over the top of our head. Typical biblical translations often separate verses 22 and 23 from verse 24.
So if you have a Bible in front of you, you could check that out. That verses 22, 23 are together, and then they split it, and then they put 24 on its lonesome.
And I mean, they're trying to show, or they attempt to show that they think these things don't belong together. But there is a unifying theme that does make them belong together.
We will make them join together.
Yeah, we'll smash them together. The modern reader cannot make sense of how images of light and darkness and serving God or money go together.
These are reasons, by the way, as to why these verses should be stuck together.
The language used doesn't allow the modern reader to see that 22:23 provides a natural translation into the following verse 24. These short, pithy verses are rich in metaphor and play on words, making it very difficult to translate them into English. The use of poetic language, and poetic language is the most exalted form of language, it's also the most difficult. It makes all the more difficult to translate each word and each phrase, because every word is thick with evocations from their original cultural encyclopedia. This is certainly the case with the first part of verse 22, regarding which the translation difficulties are legion.
And Paula puts up her own, the eye as architectural oculus. Well, let us see. Verse 22, the eye is the lamp of the body, says Jesus in Matthew. And as Paula seems to suggest here, how does the metaphor of an eye being a lamp work? Well, to make sense of this, we must go behind the text and into the philosophy and science of the time. And to help us do that, I'm going to be reading a small part of this incredibly wonderful book, which is called Catching the Light, The Entwined Theory of Light and Mind by Arthur Jajonc, Zajonc. So let me just put my reading glasses on.
That's a good Irish name.
It certainly is. Right, I'm going to read a part of this. It's on page 20 and 21. And it first starts off by talking about another philosopher called Empedocles. According to Empedocles, the divine Aphrodite, goddess of love, fashioned our eyes out of the four Greek elements of earth, water, air, and fire, fitting them together with rivets of love. Then, as when a man, thinking to make an excursion through the night, prepares a lantern, lighting it at the brightly blazing hearth fire and fitting it around with glass plates to shield it from the winds, so did Aphrodite kindle the fire of the eye at the primal hearth fire of the universe, confining it with tissues in the sphere of the eyeball. Marvellous passages were fitted into the eye, permitting it to transmit a fine interior fire through the water of the eye and out into the world, thereby giving rise to sight. Sight proceeded from the eye to the object seen. The eyes rayed out their own light. When a few hundred years after Empedocles, the evangelist Matthew wrote, "The eye is the light of the body," he was thinking not only metaphorically but scientifically. The image of the eye as a lantern was a cultural and scientific commonplace when Matthew was composing his gospel. In the struggle to unravel the mystery of sight, sunlight played a lesser role. Empedocles recognized the existence of the sun's light. That much is clear from other fragments, such as, "It is the earth that makes night by coming in the way of the sun's rays," an astute observation at the time. He seems, however, to have considered sunlight as only a part of the whole process, and recognized that something more was required for vision, something essential provided by man, the light of the body. Plato, like Empedocles, was permitted to study the secret doctrines of Pythagoras, at least until he, again like Empedocles, betrayed Pythagoras' teaching to the uninitiated through his writings. Plato's account of vision is not surprisingly similar to, if fuller than, that of Empedocles. When blended together with the later geometrical tradition of sight begun by Euclid and the medical tradition codified by Galen, Plato's treatment would persist for almost 1,500 years. In this tradition, the light of the eye played fully as important a role as the light of the sun. According to Plato, the fire of the eye causes a gentle light to issue from it. This interior light coalesces with the daylight, like to like, forming thereby a single homogeneous body of light. That body, a marriage of inner light and outer, forges a link between the objects of the world and the soul. It becomes the bridge along which the subtle motions of an exterior object may pass, causing the sensation of sight. In this view, two lights, an inner and outer, come together and act as the mediator between man and a dark, cavernous, external world. Once the link of light is formed, the message may pass, like Iris, Homer's messenger goddess, from one world to the other. The eye and the sun display to Plato a deep harmony, one still appreciated by the German poet Goethe, when in the introduction to his own theory of colour in 1810, he penned the poem, "Were the eye not of the sun, how could we behold the light? If God's might and ours were not as one, how could his work enchant our sight?" Once again, the mind's eye is not passive, but plays its own significant part in the activity of seeing. The image of an interior ocular fire captured vividly the ancient sense of that action, and so convincingly that it dominated philosophy for 1500 years.
If you think about that, that explanation of the ancient view of sight and light, it's exactly opposite of what we think of. We see the eye as being the passive receptor of light from the outside, but the ancients saw it as giving light to the outside world so that we could see it.
I was watching on YouTube some flat earth thing, and someone was trying to explain to this flat earther how eclipses work. And the guy said, "Oh, no. The moon has its own light," which is a very old idea.
Yeah.
But we've also known for much longer than we think. We think, well, most people think that the Earth is round and not flat. So his ideas were prehistoric, basically. So from that reading and from this idea, the eye is a lamp of the body, this is the takeaway. The eye is a lamp. It can be seen as a searchlight. The eye is a flashlight. All of which is saying that the eye is not a passive organ, but an active organ. The eye produces a flame or light that enables sight and recognition. This involves the whole of the body, not just this particular organ. This means that sight is produced from the inside out. Bill, you, when we did this yesterday, what was my question?
About blindness.
Yeah. So what's the explanation of blindness? Well, in their days, blindness was sin. It was caused by sin, the sin of the parents.
Yeah. And it was when...
Oh, you know the fuller answer to this, don't
Yeah,
you? In your
when-
Jewish studies.
Jewish studies. When
That just made him laugh.
Jesus...
Jewish studies.
When the Pharisees asked Jesus about the blind man who sinned, this man or his parents, and the inference was that blindness was caused by parents having sexual relationships in the daytime.
Is it still me? Well, it is.
Yeah, still. Take it away.
Well, thank you for that insight. So this involves the whole of the body. It's this being thing again. And this means that sight is produced from the inside out. Now, we have to look at the Greek here. And when we look at the Greek, we see these two words, haplous ophthalmos. Now, the word ophthalmos is one you're going to recognize, isn't it?
Has to do with eyes.
Yeah. It's about eyes. Now, the first word, though, haplous, that's kind of problematic. It can mean singular, sincere, genuine, whole, integral, essential, vital, healthy, clear. Did not already have that one? No, it didn't. Clear and good. Now, out of all those options, I mean, the synonyms abound. Which word shall we choose? Well, the word we choose here, right at the beginning of this new pericope, this new little reading, will have an absolutely huge impact on the word we choose as its opposite later on. And the two together will have a huge impact on the whole meaning of what Jesus is saying. So it's kind of crucial we get this one, at least, right. So in its most general foundational sense, haplous refers to singleness, oneness. We know this because of its contrast with another word, diplus, which is double, consisting of two. Now, although hapless does mean healthy, can mean healthy, which is what we had in our original translation from the New Revised Standard Version, which is our lectionary version. It's not a good translation in any way, shape, or form.
In this situation.
Yeah, in this situation. Haplus has within it the ancient idea of singularity, which is not the physics, quantum physics idea of singularity, by the way, before I get Bill and Paula typing in. Or wholeness.
Type away.
Something the Sermon on the Mount's been promoting all the time. So where do we end up with this? Haplus communicates the sense of integrity, generosity, and wholeness.
Now, if we go forward and look at the next section, it says, but if your eye is unhealthy,
That's
or
the New Revised Standard
unwhole,
Version.
the paired contrast to the whole and the generous eye is, in the Greek, eponeros ophthalmos, literally translated as evil eye. Yep. And it actually has that connotation. The evil eye in the ancient world was especially associated with greediness, envy, stinginess, especially when used in connection with material possessions. But its history makes it a lot more meaningful and interesting than just that.
Really is interesting.
Evil eye is one of the oldest beliefs in the ancient world. To point, there is a modern 4-work volume that is about the evil eye in history. It goes from ancient
Sumerian, isn't it?
Yeah, but even doesn't it go back to prehistoric and then move forward all the way up as far as they can, as far as the author could.
It's 4 volumes of bigness.
Big volumes.
And not cheap volumes either.
But think about this for a minute. What does it mean when someone gives you a dirty look?
You did it real well yesterday. Can you try again?
It's the destructive power of the evil eye. The evil eye is connected in Hebrew scripture with envy. Think of the gospel lesson that we heard just a few weeks ago about the workers in the vineyard. In this parable, the vineyard owner hires people to work, and he hires them at the beginning of the day, and then he goes through the day and hires other people, and at the conclusion of the day, pays everyone the same fee. And the workers who had been hired at sunrise are disgruntled. They think they should have more or different. But the parable owner, who is God, chides the disgruntled workers as being envious of their fellow workers. And the translation of that passage is your eye evil because I am good? So what needs to be noted here is that once again, the power of the eye comes from inside the person, and it's not something from outside. This concept of envy was regarding children, livestock, and female slaves or wives. And if a Hebrew man or a Jewish man of ancient times would stare at children, livestock, female slaves, or wives of
I just
contemporaries. You did. It was considered the beginning of an evil eye. And if you wanted to talk about someone's children or their livestock or something that they had, you had to start the conversation with a phrase something like, well, God bless them. Your children are very beautiful. There was a way of getting out of, 4 volumes of pricey academic press tomes about the evil eye.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And only about that subject.
Yeah.
And don't tell Vern, but I bought 2 of them. But they are Kindle versions, so we won't go mad in trying to find book space.
But if you think for a minute, this belief still exists to some degree. Now, it does mean the concept of evil eye does in Mediterranean countries.
I thought it was a Roman Catholic thing. I was so convinced of that I looked it up. And the only thing I could find was to do with Sicilian Catholics, where they still have this really superstitious nature, and the evil eye is a big part of it. And Father Bill, good to see you. My New Testament professor said there was a rabbinic version of the parable in which the owner responded, "You
Big schlemiel.
These guys did more in 1 hour than you did all day."
Now, a schlemiel, the technical version of a schlemiel is when you're at a party and a schlemiel walks into the room, you turn and ask the person you're talking to, who just left. So it's a negative. I guess that didn't go over very well. Okay. Tumbleweed. But think about, for instance, the Southernism.
I remember my first ever one of these. But carry on.
Bless her heart, but that hat is just hideous. It's a little bit different than the Hebrew, bless them, but it's still that concept of the word coming out and the attitude from within.
I
It
remember
still holds.
somebody said to me, "Bless your heart," and they said a load of stuff, and I thought, oh, it was so cute. I was like, oh, that's so cute. And then 2 weeks later, I'm thinking, I got dissed. It took that long for me to sort of work it out. Gosh, by which time I couldn't do anything about it but kind of laugh even more. Oh, well, there you go.
And the evil eye in the ancient world was especially associated with greediness, envy, evil, and stinginess.
Kit's written,
Yeah, schlemiel as a negative space. Schlemiel is a negative space. Yes, yeah.
"You waste of space." I suppose that's a modernism of that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
If we keep in mind the positive meanings, we end up with the Greek word haplos in 622, integrity, wholeness, and generosity. And we can move to provide negative meanings for the Greek word paneros, envious, evil, stingy, and greedy.
Sounds like a restaurant chain, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Paneros.
they serve really good sandwiches.
But they look at you because they can't afford them.
Yeah,
I
and they
hate
look
you.
at you. They look at you and give you a very dirty look when you order. This maintains
I'd work well in that place.
this maintains the dual referencing parallelism of rabbinic Jewish writing that Matthew has intimated. The opposite of integrity, wholeness, and generosity being envy, greed, and stinginess.
So, where are we? And I mean, most people who know me
Where-
probably will tell me where I am. But no, in this particular case,
We're in Poneros bread.
yes, we are. Preneros, yes. Verse 22, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. 23, but if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. So we can make this read more accurately by saying 22, the eye of the lamp is the body. So if your eye is whole and generous, your whole body will be full of light. 23, but if your eye be envious and stingy, your whole body will be full of darkness. So we've now parsed this portion of these two verses. What's left?
Well, we have to look at light and darkness. They're obviously opposites. Light is attached to what is whole and generous. Darkness is attached to what is envious and stingy. But we have to keep in mind that what or where is that being generated? Where is the light and the dark coming from? Dark is not seen as an absence of light, but as a real force in and of itself. The light comes from within, the darkness comes from within. This is a whole heart-body response.
If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Now, most commentators seem to fudge this final part of the verse. We've looked at loads of them. And so we're just going to follow suit. We're going to fudge. But we're going to fudge by trying to explain the difficulties here. Because Father Lewis would suggest that what we hear here, this how great is the darkness, is some kind of rabbinical hyperbole used to shock and keep the hearer's attention. I don't agree. I would suggest that continuing the understanding of light as being created within the person is what I'm going to call a distortion occurs, which leads to the creation of darkness, which is really odd for me because I tend to think of darkness as an absence, not as something created. And yet, whatever may be said, at least the metaphor of light and darkness is entirely appropriate here. Each person is aligned either with light, good, or dark, evil. Their alignment results in a state of the soul as being either light or dark. And in typical poetic wisdom form, there's no in-between option envisioned. There's
One or
the
the
left or
other.
the right. You're there. There's no grey.
Now, if you remember the formulations back in earlier fudging as a time-honored academic tradition. Yes. Yes.
I promise I will fudge to the best of my ability.
And if I can't sell the fudge, I'll eat it. If you think about the structure of some of the verses that have preceded where we are now, Jesus gives a theoretical understanding, and then he has a concrete example. So I think that's where we are now with verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Now, you might want to try to ask your question, how is one slave owned by two people? In slave being property, it could be passed down as inheritance. And if two brothers happen to inherit the same slave, you've got this situation built in. Our understanding of the verses that we have just looked at leads us directly into the applied meaning that follows in verse 24. Because of this sharp light and dark contrast and its either-or reality, disciples are reminded that no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. And again, continuing the flow from 6:19-21 into 6:22-23, there is a strong contrast placed before the hearer. Heaven versus earth, light versus dark, generous versus stingy, God versus money, all speaking to the issue of one's relationship to money.
But hold on, because the translation here is one in which issues abound. So let's have a look at the translation and its problem. And it's kind of weird, really, because I can say the word that we find, which is translated as money, and the Greek is easy, mamona. And why is that easy? Because it sounds like mammon, which most of us older
translation.
people, I think is still very popular in some versions of the Bible as well.
Yeah.
Now, this is actually a transliteration because, hey, if you can use a word that people know, why bother spend time translating it? Which is kind of weird, really, but it's done. Whereas other people, when they've looked at this, they thought, oh no, we need to at least put the word money there. And then some people, like the editorial board of the New Revised Standard Version, again, our lectionary, they put the word wealth there.
Because the word originally referred not only to actual coinage, but to property and slaves and everything else.
Now, the Greek word here, mammon, mamona, appears in the New Testament only 3 times here and twice in Luke. And the Greek is also a transliteration. So we've got a transliteration, mammon, from a transliteration, mona, I'll get it right, from the Aramaic. And it's the Aramaic which gives it the meaning of property or possessions or money. Question: why would Matthew choose to retain an Aramaic transliteration rather than translate it himself into a Greek word for either money or treasure or material possessions? Ding, 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 ding. Well, we don't know. We're fudging it again. With the best will in the world, we cannot answer that question. Maybe the word mammon was so well known from Jesus' day into the time that Matthew was writing that he just left it as it was.
If you think about Matthew addressing his gospel to Jews who were following the Messiah, they would have heard that word before. I'm sure that it was familiar to them. So he didn't see any reason to translate it.
Does beg the question, why didn't he just write Hebrew? Aramaic or whatever,
Well, yeah.
So the Greek. But that's because it was the business tongue, wasn't it? The business
Yeah.
you wrote in
My Greek teacher in seminary called koine, and it's a type of Greek called koine. And he said koine Greek is truck driver Greek. It was the language that was spoken in commerce. And it was the common Greek that was spoken throughout the Mediterranean.
My Greek teacher, after teaching me, gave up and started working with gorillas.
Sign language? Okay, first we need to recognize the consistency of Jesus' use of flourishing.
We're rounding it all
wholeness,
up now.
Even within these verses. There is nothing of the law in what is being said, but there is a continued highlighting of how and who we are and what we need to be to move towards God who is. To us, the complication of the eye as a lamp shows us how we need to dig deeply into the context of the words so that we may comprehend more all into which Jesus is calling us. Perhaps in this day and age, ask yourself the question, how would Jesus have said it?
And we end there because we really do want you to think about that and tippy-typey in, how you think Jesus might have put it to us in our day and age. We thought about it for a while, and we came up with a couple, although I cannot for the life of me remember.
They weren't very good.
Oh, no. Well, it's true.
Yeah.
Dreadful, The eye is so help us, Ian. If you've got any questions, if you want any clarifications, if you'd love me to scratch my beard, then I'm more willing to do that. Yes, we ended up early on purpose, so we got 20 minutes that you can ask us things. If not from this week, then from how far back can you remember? If just from this
Yesterday.
week, just this week. Yes, and if you ever get the chance of, if you would really like to read an incredibly good book that will have you fascinated about something we take so much for granted, I'm talking about the science of light and sight and the physics behind it. This is just a wonderful, wonderful book. It's even a signed copy because the author's sister, I think it was her sister, used to come to our church, and I've been trying for the life of me to think her name. She worked for USF, I think. She was a professor there at one of the local universities, and then she ended up going to Afghanistan to work with the people there. If that rings any bells to people and you can remember her name, please put it down there. But yes, a really, really good book.
The crickets are chirping.
Yes, do you think we've killed them?
I think they've all signed off.
It says there's still 12 people, but it could be they've gone off making a cup of very, very strong tea
Yeah.
to get them over this. For me, when I read things like this, it like Father Lewis said, it reminds us that we have to dig really deep into what the Bible is saying. Because we could easily have just gone through that and says, the eye is a lamp, and then just thought nothing more of it. But when you actually dig into it, it just becomes a world of its own with a whole set of understandings and way of seeing things that we can't be a part of with the best will in the world. We cannot think ourselves into that mental space, can we?
No.
Ah,
Kit, you cannot serve both God and mammon, wealth. I realized listening today that that in my mind I translated as you cannot serve both God and greed.
exactly.
A good translation.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the things that I have over the last 16 weeks come to realize is how creative and particular the Gospeler Matthew was. The Gospel of Matthew is a I just saw Bill's.
Yeah.
I thought of You Are the Light of the World. Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing is a light on the city.
A hill, the city on a hill.
Yeah. Sticking your light in the window rather than sticking it under the bed.
Yeah.
Those things suddenly resonate in a different way. But go on.
But how skillful Matthew was as an author. There are no wasted words in Matthew's gospel. One time I had a friend years ago who had worked in, what was that funny that I had a friend?
I thought you were just going to stop then. I had a friend years ago.
Yeah, no. who had worked in Hollywood in movie making and TV programs and so on. And he said that there are no incidental events in a movie or a TV series, and that someone walking across the stage at some point could very well be the clue to what's going on. And this is very much what Matthew does. There is not a concept, a story, a saying that is in Matthew that doesn't try to bring us to that conclusion of what Matthew is talking about, the kingdom of heaven. the kingdom of God and how we are being called into it. And Kit says, we're back to this little light of mine. I'm going to let it shine. Yes. Yep.
I've often thought it was weird that one of Superman's powers is that he can turn his eyes into
X-ray vision.
lasers and stuff. No, I bought a pair of those X-ray specs.
Oh
to
yeah,
find
you
the
wanted
back
to,
of-
yeah.
Yeah, they didn't work. But it's weird how we're watching a kind of deconstruction of Superman 2, was it? The Critical Drinker,
Oh no, it was
the remake of Superman.
Independence Day 2.
Oh, I
Resurgence.
watched the thing before you arrived, the Superman one. But it says one of the problems with that story is that when these men escape from this two-dimensional world, which was done by an explosion or something, they suddenly gained all these powers, including these powers to do what Superman did, including with their eyes. And he asked the reasonable question, if they didn't know they had any of these powers before, how would you learn them instantly?
Yeah.
It's just a reasonable question.
And just ask, I was seeing in the ancient view of vision a sort of modern, postmodern idea of how each individual mind, in a sense, generates its own reality.
Wow, that's really, it's really modern.
Yeah.
It's modern, what's neurophysiology, isn't it? To do with when you can put electrodes in people's brains at certain points, or like a helmet with
Electrodes all over it.
magnetic resonance and stuff, and you can make people feel and see things. Wow, that's really good. Thanks, Anne, for that. I want one of those things.
I think the corollary is
You're not fudging that one, Paula. The real answer is that DC Comics sucks.
I think back to Anne's comment. I think that's very true. That what we perceive as reality is a vision and interpretation that our mind does. But I think there also is some kernel of truth in that we can all agree on the concreteness of certain things. So it's not just what our mind constructs.
Is there a concrete, objective reality
I would say yes.
beyond the senses?
I would say yes.
But how people perceive that can be so different.
Yeah.
I mean, you get these, what they call it, where the senses get mixed up. So people hear color, smell, I don't know, smell sound or something. It's just all mixed up, where the senses get muddled up. We're supposed to have six, but they've discovered so many other auxiliary senses. Because it's like saying that the sense of taste is one thing. It isn't really, is it? If you start thinking about
Sweet,
sweetness, and
sour,
stuff like that.
bitter.
I believe umami has been kind of written off as a bit of a joke, apparently.
Well, that's because people don't like Japanese food.
I love Japanese curry, though. Yeah. So, yes, having worked with blind people and how their hearing is sharpened. There's a guy, he navigates his own world by going, and he has a stick, and he's so attuned to the acoustic, even in outdoor spaces there's an acoustic, that he can tell when objects are just by, anything, I think, if I'm correct, the brain can distinguish if something's like 15 nanoseconds, I think. It can distinguish between two different signals. And he is able to do that and navigate really well for someone who's absolutely blind in a world where you think that's just not possible. It just isn't possible. Paula says there is indeed a concrete objective reality. We tend to notice it when we smack into concrete objects. Synesthesia is the thing, yes. Really trippy and apparently nowhere near as rare as previously thought. Correct. But the other reality is that in the quantum world, there's more space between any solid object than there is solid object. Because you can compress those things into nothingness, which takes us back into the Big Bang, of course. Related to light, but not the eye, I read this recently and it stuck with me. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Ding!
Ting.
There's a tune that goes with that.
Well, there's the typewriter by Leroy Anderson.
Leroy?
Leroy Anderson.
How's it go?
Ding.
Oh, it's repeat.
Yeah. And usually when an orchestra is going to do that piece, the percussion player who's going to play the typewriter, comes out and it's a big deal, and they tune the typewriter to the A, and
You can tune a typewriter.
no, you can't.
Oh, okay.
But the percussionist keeps hitting one key of the typewriter.
Yeah, the properties of light are just incredible. And I think we've only just really begun to dig into what's possible. And we've also come across some strange anomalies to do with it. It's like the reconstruction of a rainbow using a prism, for instance, to do with how light travels at different speeds, according to the wavelength for the color. And of course, the visible light, in our terms of visible light, is just a tiny fraction of the spectrum. And how babies could see different things because their eyes have either been trained to see certain things or they're just more able to because
Or they haven't been limited yet by.
Yeah, and that's certainly true with kids and sound.
Well, there's a theory in musical circles about perfect pitch, which is the ability to hear a note and to say that's an A on the piano or that's an E flat. Here we go.
No wonder Jesus could walk through walls. Oh, here we go, Kit. Jesus walking through walls. Yes, the resurrection thing. It makes you. I've always pondered how the resurrection happens. He is him, still has wounds and everything, and yet he's not him. It's just fascinating. Kit. Oops, I hit the return too soon. Let a teacher wave away the flies and put a plaster on the wound. Don't turn your head. Keep looking at the bandaged place. That's where the light enters you, and don't believe for a moment that you're healing yourself. Kind of is that lyrics or a poem?
Poem. Well, about sound and perfect pitch. Perfect pitch is a phenomenon where people can recognize and name musical notes without seeing it on a sheet of paper or on a keyboard or an instrument. And the theory is that everyone is born with perfect pitch as a newborn infant. And that is one of the reasons why infants distinguish the pitch and timbre of their parents, male and female, and then other people, according to the pitch of their voice. And that this ability begins to drift away, but in certain individuals it remains. I know a friend of mine, I asked him one time about perfect pitch because I don't have perfect pitch. But I asked him how
Poem
it
by
was.
Rumi, 13th century.
I like Rumi. And he said he associates pitch with different colors. But I guess there must be
Well,
some visual,
synesthesia thing.
yeah, where he hears a note and it jogs a color in his mind. There's a book. It's an autobiography written by a British man who is autistic, and I just found the book really, really interesting. But it's called Born on a Blue Day, and in his mind, each day of the week is a different color, different shade, and numbers have the same quality. They have color variation and so on. And he was able to repeat the value of pi to some incredible number of digits. And it took, like 15, 20 hours, and it was done at Oxford. And he has kind of the Guinness World Record
Oh,
book.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really interesting.
And he's been around the world to meet other savants,
Yeah,
including the guy who died recently, who could just read two sides of the page and read telephone directories and could tell you, if you gave a name, tell you where the address, phone number, and everything. If you said what your birthday was,
he can tell you.
you tell what day it was, what the weather was like, and all sorts. Yeah, he kind of died just.
Yeah, he was the character for
Rain Man.
Rain Man.
Was it Rain Man?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So there's kind of linkage between there's linkage in so many ways between light and sound, and what we can do with them, and the mind, and what we may see as a damaged personality actually showing us greater limits of what the mind can actually achieve. So it could be that we're the abnormal ones because we've put a brake on what our mind can do.
we're stuck in the ordinary.
Yeah. And not just that, when I am so kind of mad that I wasn't born in a culture that used microtonal scales in music. Because when you're listening to the imam calling prayer, or you're a Hindu woman singing one of the songs, or some of the Eastern people just being together and singing, the songs of their people, literally. What we tend to hear is a load of but what's actually going on is this precise placement of the vocal cords to hit notes that we can't even imagine. Again, it's that we've been trained into this tonic solfa scale,
Yeah,
which has been which is again a fudge, because pianos are tuned to even temperament. They're not tuned straight so that we can play more keys. That's the reason, isn't it? And so we've adjusted our ears again, so we don't scream when we hear something which is actually out of tune. And yet these people, they will just come on and they will start singing. And for some people, it just seemed like a noise, but it is, in its own ways, there's a beauty that we can't even imagine, because again, our minds have been limited to just listening this Western way of things. Damn you, Mozart, whoever it was. Well, thank you so much. Paula. For a while, Orlando Science Center hosted a few art collections meant to render a synesthetic experience of art as color. They had a few panel discussions on the subject too. Yeah, there's a couple of there used to be a couple of really good programs on Netflix about this, which I found fascinating, and they were a part of a series about consciousness. So I don't know. I cannot for the life of me remember, and this is 2 or 3 years ago now, so it probably won't be on. But if you're interested in this kind of thing, this crossover of the senses, and how, as Paula said, it's more common than you can imagine. And it's just a fascinating insight into us as humans, and is really, really, really cool as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We do hope that you've enjoyed your time with us. We really do appreciate you spending your time with us. We, in theory, we should be able to go on to Gallup now because the foundations have been laid. We've laid at least 2 courses of solid stone to place everything else on, and we're going to the land of examples, one after another now, to at least the end of chapter 6. So I hope you're looking forward to that. It may be that we only do 1 verse next week after saying that. Oh well. Stay safe, please, and do whatever you can to maintain your health. I'm going to do that by not watching the presidential debate tonight. I'll be watching the highlights some other time. But otherwise, I will see you on Sunday, either at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or at the drive-through. And you will see us via the TV or whatever it is you work through. 6 weeks of foundation.
16 weeks.
16 weeks. Yeah, we're amateurs. We could take a lot longer. Keep us in your prayers as you are in ours. And until next time, take care and God bless.